Kathi, I am so excited about this session today. I have not done anything but talk about this topic for the last 12 months. And I feel that there's just so much energy around this in the market at the moment. It's coming from CEOs, it's coming from CFOs, it's coming from CHROs, CIOs. I don't know, you must be finding the same thing.
Oh, totally. I think the entire C-suite and everybody in the organization is always looking for how do I do this thing? Because AI is here to stay, and we need to think about how work changes and job change and roles change and activities change and outcomes change. So yeah, I'm thrilled for this too. Really looking
I
forward
am,
to the
and
conversation.
I'm personally excited because I remember 3 years ago sitting with you in Vegas and talking about this, and I was saying, this is where it's going to go. I really believe that this is going to be a shift that we're all going to see. So to get to go on this journey with you all the way through to the other side has been incredibly exciting. So thank you for your mentorship in this whole space.
Well, thanks for the partnership, Siobhan, and so impressed where you're leading all of this and how you're kind of helping organizations get their arms around this really important and hairy problem and how you redesign work. So it's super exciting.
Well, for those that are dialing in now and for those that are listening in later, this is going to be the most incredible session with Kathi. So, for those who don't know Kathi, Kathi is the Senior Vice President of Research at the Josh Bersin Company. Kathi has been the driving force behind the research, which is called the Redesigning Work for the AI Era. And what we're going to do today is we're going to split this session up into, a high level. Kathy's going to walk us through, what is everything that they have learned, give a whole pile of context about what customers are saying, right from the actual customers themselves. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try and answer as many questions as possible. And then I'm going to bring you through a session on how you can actually bring this to action within your workforce. So I'm Siobhan Savage. I'm one of the founders and also the CEO of Reejig. I am very excited about this topic because we have just honestly seen so many companies at a place where no matter how mature you are as an organization, everyone is wanting to get together to really think about how they solve this because it's a completely unsolved problem. Now, one of the things that we did with Kathi and the team was we got together some of the most pioneering leaders in the space. And what we wanted to do was to go through how their companies are thinking about re-engineering work. What does work look like in this new era? And this research that Kathy's going to walk you through comes right from, talking to these customers, but also talking to, the broader industry as well. So Kathi, I would love to hand over to you to really take folks through, what is it that you're seeing in the sort of state of business in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I know everybody is thinking about the AI transformation, and we get all these studies and all these insights of what's happening in the market. So just a few insights that seem to be contradicting, but they're really pointing to this need for work redesign. So 92% of CEOs, that comes from the CEO study that PwC did earlier this year of 4,000 CEOs around the globe, said they're investing more in Gen AI and AI overall. And I think that's probably has changed now, that it's probably now closer to 100%. I don't think there's a single organization where the CEO would say we're not focusing on that. So everybody's focused on that, and everybody's focused on that not just to reduce costs, but really to increase revenue, make the company grow, have better customer products, have better experiences, have better get into new markets. So that kind of AI transformation is really real at the C-suite, but then also it triggers down, of course, to every person in the organization. At the same time, of course, there's going to be there has already been enormous amounts spent. 1 trillion has already been spent by the AI
That's
companies
crazy.
on infrastructure. Crazy, right? That's the GDP of Switzerland. So we've spent literally the entire GDP of Switzerland, actually more than the GDP of a whole country, just an infrastructure on for the AI, for having the AI run, of course. And then there's these studies that come out that say, for example, this study from MIT, and I know there's been a lot of discussion around that say only 5% of businesses actually have gotten real impact out of these all of these investments. So what that means is we're actually very early on in the AI transformation, of course, which is not surprising, right? We're pretty early on this. I mean, when you think about when ChatGPT came out, it was exactly 3 years ago now. And so we are trying to learn very quickly. But what this research and other research actually shows, it's not because the AI models are not good. They're actually pretty good at what they're trying to do. But what researchers here have uncovered, and what we are seeing too, it's what they call a learning gap, that basically people and the companies don't know how to incorporate AI into workflows, into processes, and how to actually change the work that happens around the AI. So that's really at the heart of what we wanted to unpack. Well, how could you be part of that 5%? And AI actually, the agents are, of course, here. And I was just on a very big webinar last week where somebody said, well, can you describe what an agent is? Maybe that's a dumb question. And it's not a dumb question at all. And everybody actually defines it a little bit differently. For us, we say an AI agent is not something that just gives you an answer, but actually does something for you. Like they do actual transactions in backend system. They don't just give you advice, but they actually do something for you. But when you think about these AI agents, of course, when they do something for you, how does it fit with the things that you do, right? So how does it shape the work that you're doing? And when you're thinking about, I know there's many examples in the HR area, but let's think about a non-HR area, a marketing person, for example. If the AI agent can create a campaign for you, well, how does it write campaign emails or find out what you should say in this campaign? When the AI agent can do these things for you, how does it shape how the marketing person does their own work, right? So that's what we want to unpack here. How can we first prioritize where we should focus on redesigning work and rethinking work, but then also how can we actually elevate what everybody is doing with these AI agents that do all these amazing things for us, and now soon will work together with each other. And so we are really seeing that in this AI transformation, there's really 4 stages. And I always ask people, and I'd love to ask everybody on the call too, maybe to put in the chat where you're at in this AI transformation, that we're seeing the AI transformation go in 4 stages. Stage 1 is where you're using AI assistants like ChatGPT or the Copilot or any of the Gemini, whatever you have, for your own personal productivity. So you're using it to make, I don't know, right.
Did I jump ahead? Did I jump ahead
please.
in the slide? Is that okay?
No, this was good.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry.
Yeah. We're right here. Yeah, we're right here. I'm just talking about the stage 1. So you did well, Siobhan, and you're doing this seamlessly. You're reading my mind. I know, no, but you're doing this really well, and you don't know what I'm going to say because I'm thinking about basically what I'm saying here. So really kudos to you for moving the slides properly. So stage 1 is basically these AI assistants where you're using them for kind of like personal productivity, and that's great, right? And we've been doing this for the last 3 years. I think most of us have used the AI tools more and more. There was just a study that came out that said actually 45% of people are using more assistive AI, like these generative AI systems like ChatGPT, Copilot, every day. 45% of the population are using them every day. And that is increasing really rapidly. And then you say, well, this is great, but how can I have the AI actually do something for me? That's the agent. That's stage 2, where we just talked about how can the AI actually do something for me, but it's still within your own job, basically. It's maybe automating some things. Maybe when you're a recruiter, for example, you use it for interview scheduling or something like that, but your job is still your job. And then there's the huge shift basically to when you're saying stage 3, where you have these multifunctional agents that do different things basically and tie them together. So you could say, for example, there's going to be an interview scheduling agent on the recruiting side that connects with the pre-screening agent that basically tells them who have we pre-screened and who are the best candidate. And then the interview scheduling agent maybe connects with the kind of the onboarding agent. Eventually, you could see basically how these agents could connect more multifunctionally, and maybe the onboarding agent then connects to a learning agent that says, what does the new hire have to learn? So soon enough, you'll say, well, wait a minute, if these multifunctional agents do so many things of my job, what's going to be my work? What's going to be my job? What am I going to do? And so you see these cases where you have, for example, the recruiters be more talent advisors to help maybe internal people to find a better career in the first 90 days or something like that. Or maybe there are more workforce planners that work with the business to think about where do we have to go basically in the overall, in our overall team structure, and what skills do we need on that team. So soon enough, basically when you go from stage 2 to stage 3, you really have to think about how does the work change, and how does the role change, and how do we basically redesign the work. And then stage 4 is full work transformation, where you're basically saying, well, if we have autonomous agents that basically do entire business processes end to end, what are the new roles? What are the new jobs? And how do we oversee and direct these agents? So that's one job. But then how do we do the things that we as humans are best at, right? So how do we then carve the niche basically of saying, what should we all do? So I'm looking basically at the where you all sit, and 1.5 is great. 3 to 4 is amazing. Some of you are too. I did this actually a show of hands in a meeting in a conference last week in San Francisco, and we had about 150 leaders there in San Francisco, which arguably is the AI capital of the world, right? Because this is San Francisco where like much of the innovation is happening. And they were talent leaders and CHROs and talent acquisition people and L&D leaders. And guess what? Almost everybody was in stage 2, even in San Francisco. Yep. And there was one of the big AI companies, I won't mention who it is, one of the AI companies that we all know and love, or maybe not love, but we all use. And even they said we're stage 2 internally because we're actually building this, but we're not using it internally. So that kind of work redesign is a really big step here and a really big differentiator here.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Kathi, because what we have seen from like just the work that we're doing as well is that I think folks are, at the early stage of AI, just threw it out there and hope for the best. And, employees, you go off and do your own thing. And, we're going to hope for massive amounts of productivity gains from this. At the end of the day, the employees are going to create their own version of a process. Any company that wants to increase velocity, increase revenue, do all of those things, you need to have a systematic way of redesigning that at a top level so that everyone doesn't have if you're all in a canoe and everyone's rowing in the wrong direction, you're not going to get very far. So I think everyone's kind of went through this AI touristing moment for the last 2 years, and we've all now come out and we've woken up a little bit from that hangover, and we're like, oh, okay, so now we need to think about it. So the way that you see this is exactly the way we've seen this being playing out in customers. And what's interesting is your job architecture phase, stage 1, because like the job architecture is like pretty archaic. I totally agree with the concept of like labeling and orchestrating, a library of ability with the job architect. But I think that we need to move more into that work architecture and understanding it, at a broader level. But most customers I see are stage 1 or stage 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is like the most advanced of the advanced, right? So it's very interesting that what you see is what we see as well.
No, it's absolutely true. And I think it's fair to say also the reason for that is, of course, AI is new, but then also I saw a question here, what's the biggest differentiator? I will say that work redesign is a new muscle that organizations don't necessarily have, right? We have all done maybe these job architecture projects and the job architecture consolidation, and we have to do this every few years because the job architecture gets so out of whack of everything. But doing actually understanding what the work is and how you constantly redesign this, not something that we've actually really done before. So it's and that's what is holding companies back. It's not actually the technologies. That's the same finding that this MIT study has. It's not the technology that holds companies back because these technologies already exist. But as you said, if everybody's going in a different direction, how can you make this significant impact, and how can you connect the different roles and pieces? Because I'm not sure what I should do next. If I'm a recruiter and I only know what I do in recruiting and I don't know what else I should be doing, how am I going to redesign my job myself? Usually people can't do this themselves, right? They can do a little productivity increases, but yeah, we really need this kind of guidance and this kind of top down, looking at this holistically and then seeing where's the big opportunities, and helping share kind of what somebody has been doing kind of successfully as well. So that's what we are talking about when we're talking about dynamic work design. And I know you probably all will get this paper from Siobhan and team afterwards
Yeah,
to
we'll send it
really
after.
read this. Okay, that's great. Yeah,
We'll
so
we'll share it
that's
after.
kind of
The other thing, Kathi, that we see as well that people it doesn't click automatically is like the job architecture is this like once in a moment like photograph of who you were as an organization. And
yeah,
everyone's talking about AI removing tasks and impacting jobs. But the part that everyone's forgetting is that AI also introduces new tasks that you've never done before. So it's
that's
not
right.
just the idea that tasks are going away, it's also we're now doing new work. And the second you finish your job architecture, and they, whoever does it
Exactly.
leaves, it's already out of date. It's
No,
that rapid
absolutely.
of
Exactly.
change as
Yes,
well, right? And this is why your dynamic work design research is really important because it's this living, breathing overview and constantly evolving company, right? And the work that's
that's
being
right.
done. So we'll definitely share this after to folks as well.
No, that's great because here we're just like scratching the surface really, and we have lots of examples and case studies and concepts in there. But really, what we're saying here is what we call this dynamic work design. As you said, Siobhan, it needs to be constant. It needs to be this kind of not just job-based model, but thinking about what outcomes are we trying to accomplish, and then how can we design the work around these outcomes. So it's really breaking the mold of saying, oh, we're just looking at basically automating specific things and really thinking about what's the outcome of a specific business process and how can we do this completely differently with AI at the table. And that's hard to do manually, of course, and that's why tools like what you have really, Shaban, with Reejig are so important because things are changing so fast. The speed, the scale, is all changing much more rapidly because before when we did maybe job redesign or work redesign, we could focus on one process and we could take a long time to say, okay, we have a new system coming in. How does the workflow change? We've always done this, but now we need tools to do this differently. And so really thinking about how can you use AI not just as a tool to automate, but to solve business problems. Where is the biggest opportunity for us for AI to add value, not just automate things? How can we go beyond just looking at skills? Because now AI tools don't have skills, right? AI agents don't have skills, but they do work. They do tasks, they do activities, they create outcomes. So think about the skills come after that. After you understand what work needs to be done, what skills do people need to have? And that's a different, I think that's creating that kind of connection between the jobs that you have and the skills that you need is that work intelligence in the middle of all of this. Why do companies do this? Well, companies do like this work design, ask for work design for really four main reasons that we found. And we, by the way, found when we talked with many of these companies, all four of them are going on at the same time in
Mm.
most companies, right? Most companies are looking for this productivity, that cost reduction. Of course, we're saying, well, we have too many people, we're spending too much. How can we cut costs? And I know CEOs are always looking for that. I was just talking with a big technology company, and they said, our CEO said, we have to save 20% in every single department across the board, right? Everybody needs to save 20%. And that's very drastic mandate. I think you might have different mandates, but most companies have kind of really top-down mandates to say, where can we cut, where can we save? And that's one thing. Of course, other companies are saying, well, we actually need to grow more than we can hire people around. So we need to kind of up level. And maybe these like semiconductor companies, for example, they need more people than they can ever hire. So like, how can we use work redesign to use AI basically to do the work that we can't hire enough people of. So that's kind of another component of that. And we might have that in the same company, having both of these that seem conflicting, but they're really not because different groups might have different priorities. How can we create a better customer experience? So how can we create more value for our customers with AI? And that's many companies are looking for that too. And the last one has to do with what we just talked about, this job architecture really being arcane and really like I don't think anybody, if I asked everybody here on the call who is happy with their job architecture, probably everybody would say, well, no, we're not. Our jobs, as soon as we create a job, it's already obsolete and nobody does what the jobs say they do. So that kind of cleanup that you have to do all four of them are probably driving
Mm.
why everybody's interested in work design. Do you see that too, Siobhan? How do you see
Yeah.
this play out?
So when we first started what we were doing right at the start of this, it was very cost out. Everything was cost, cost cut. Everything was
Yeah,
about that. What's actually emerged probably in the last 12 months is we get like a very consistent piece of feedback. It's I want to reduce costs. So remove out, overhead that we don't need. I want to take away work that we don't need. Second skill for what they look for is they look at how do you help me make more money? So look at the
yeah,
things that help
that's
like
right.
us grow and make money. And then the third level is how do we make our work more enjoyable for our people so that they stay longer? Again, directly linked to cost because the longer your people stay, the less knowledge and money you lose in the rehiring of that whole kind of life cycle. So that's typically what we see. So it's actually very similar to what you're saying. But there's
Okay.
definitely like a lot more focus on like we don't want this just to be about cost. Like how do you help us make more money through creativity, innovation? Like what are the tasks that directly link to making more money is the more
Yeah,
recent one I'm seeing, which is great
yeah,
because it's not just about removing headcount.
yeah.
And the other thing I'm seeing a lot is we're going to grow our business by 10% of revenue, let's say, and we don't want to increase headcount. We're not going to let people go. But what we're going to do is we're going to force the business to grow at our normal pace without increasing the normal headcount that we typically would have put in. So that's another
Yeah.
one that we're starting to see come from CFO, which is great as well, because it's not like a direct cutting out people out of your team. It's just a completely remodeling of how we work and amplifying the people that you've already got.
No, absolutely. I love that you said that too, because we hear this a lot too. I mean, this kind of um, just forcing the productivity to occur without letting people go, right? So we want to grow, and it's always doing more with. I hate actually that saying of doing more with less. I think
Pedal
having more.
faster.
Yeah, I mean, like exactly. That's I think the wrong concept, but I think it's the concept of um, like putting less effort in and getting higher output, and that's I think the right approach, right? So you're just not like doing more, but you're actually prioritizing. You're saying, well, we can actually use all of these AI tools to really elevate all of this. And for us, this really comes back to how you do work design in a much more business driven way. And this model on the left hand side comes from a study that we did a few years ago actually on how org design and work design actually works best in a much more agile, much more business driven way. And we say basically always start with understanding the business problem that you have. And then you're thinking about how you're going to organize things, how you're going to operate things, and what work needs to be done. So always going from like, what's the real issue that we're trying to solve for? And it might be all four of these that we saw before. It might be another one, right? We might say there's a group that we really want to amplify, a new product they want to bring to the market. How can we do this when we have, for example, constrained resources, as you mentioned just right now, Siobhan? And well, the work design is in the middle of all of this. But also from our study, we saw that most companies actually are not very good at this. And maybe
Mhm.
not surprising, but most companies are very early on redesigning work or designing work around the outcomes that need to be accomplished. So rather than just saying, well, here's all the steps that we need to do. What is this thing really about? What is this work for? What is this process about? And then saying, how can we have also employees weigh in and check with them and make sure that it works for them as well? And then really use tools like Reejig and others to understand the work that actually happens at its base. And so you see here, only 2 in 10 actually do that for work, designing work around outcomes. 1 in 10 involve employees in any of this work design, which is concerning, right? Because in the end of the day, at some point, employees will have to work differently, and if they don't adopt this, it's not going to happen. And deeply understanding work, of course, really, really important. So that's how we come to this new organizational muscle. We call it a new organizational muscle, and you see here how we define dynamic work design and how it's different to kind of this episodic kind of job redesign that we've all done, right? We bring a big consulting company in and they take half a year or a year and you pay them a lot of money to do all this job architecture work. And by the time you're done, it's already obsolete and it's just basically about the jobs, and it's kind of focused on kind of how you do this hierarchically versus this continuous ongoing, like always looking at where do we need to make tweaks because the AI is moving so fast. Every single day, some new AI tool, of course, comes about. And so doing this manually is just not going to happen, right? If you think
Mhm.
about, and I think it sounds very overwhelming to think about, if we do it the old-fashioned way to like do, I think, work surveys or like observe people how they do work, how are you going to keep up with all of
It
this?
also
And
it also freaks people out. Like if you go
of
to all
course,
of your employees and go, we're looking at AI right now, and we're gonna just sit and watch how you work, or please everyone self-report how you work, you will cause like absolute like psychological impacts to that workforce
absolutely,
where they are petrified. And also you'll find a lot of the times you'll not get the true state of affairs
of
because people
course,
will overinflate or be on best behavior mode, right? It's like, when you're being watched,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
I totally am like anti that way of like solving for this. I do agree with you though that the employee needs to be directed and shown and kind of shown this kind of new way of working and the new expectations, because it's unfair to expect people to work in a new way without directing them towards what it is with like the new outcome. But completely agree with you on that whole work design component, and just time and motion studies is like super dinosaur days,
I know
right? Like
exactly.
it's like
Yeah,
it's like back in the olden
exactly.
days.
Exactly. And luckily, we have these tools now and these technologies now to do this. And here's one example, and I always love this example. We have a big case study on this too that you can, I think, also get from Siobhan and team, where we basically WPP, a really big marketing services organization, 110,000 employees, right? And they had 55,000 job titles, and they were looking of they built their own kind of AI tooling and system, and they were looking why they wouldn't get more impact from it. And then they said, well, it's going to be a little bit hard to understand how it's impacting all these jobs because we have 55,000 job titles. So literally you had on average two people in every job title. So it was impossible to see where's the biggest impact, where should we redesign this work, how should we see where the biggest impact is of these AI tools that we like IT built for us and that we're not getting the biggest impact from. And so they worked with the Reejig team and basically said, well, let's first think about how we cluster jobs together and organize jobs in a much more kind of integrated way. And they eventually got down to just 600 job titles. And now, of course, they have a much better chance of creating these, what they call job archetypes, where they basically say, here's the job of maybe a media planner or a marketing strategist or whatever all of their jobs are, to say, how can they use AI to get better customer outcomes, not just to do things faster, better, cheaper, basically. So, and now they're working even with their customers on, well, how does it impact how they work with customers? And
Mhm.
guess what? The customers, of course, are happy with that because now the customers have less people that touch them and that have to work with them. So it eventually even impacts their customers as well. Okay, yeah, let's talk about this work intelligence and how it fits in the middle of the job architecture and the skills, because I know everybody is on the skill-based organization journey, and I know we've been talking for years about how do we get our arms around skills and how do we map the skills to the jobs, and it never quite fits, right? If all of you are probably working on skill-based organization stuff, and how do we map jobs to skills? And it never quite fits because we were missing the middle piece of this work intelligence. So if you think about all the skills that people have and what's in your job architecture, you're missing kind of the middle piece, which we call work intelligence, which is basically it's like what Reejig, for example, is giving you, but to say, where's all the roles, not just all the jobs, but where are the different roles that people play? Because usually a person that has a job in your HCM system plays multiple roles in the organization. Most people don't just have one hat and they have many different hats that they play in an organization. So what are all the different roles that people play? What are the goals? What are the outcomes? And then how do we decompose this in tasks and activities, basically, to say, how does all of this fit together? And then what skills do they need? So the skills are the most kind of granular thing that you can now map once you understand all the tasks that they do and all the activities that they do. What skills do you need to accomplish these tasks? So if you're, for example, a recruiter, you play many different roles, right? You play the role of a sourcer and maybe a talent consultant to the business and all of that. Each of these tasks or activities need a number of different skills. And the reason why it never quite fit was because we were missing the insights on the work
Yeah.
intelligence level
Yeah.
of that.
And I think one of the things that really fascinated me, because like I started super early in the skills space, but like when you look at supply and demand, we focus so much on the people and the skills of the people, and we never really spent a lot of time thinking about the actual work itself. And one of the biggest
Yes,
realizations that I had like over 3 years ago was like people have skills, jobs have tasks, and then you require skill to complete task. Like the whole part, the core unit of work that was missing was the actual work itself. The
that's
skills were
right.
being
Exactly.
inferred from a job title, and we all know the job title, job description, job advert data is really terrible. So if we're inferring all of the
Exactly.
knowledge about work of skill based on that, we know that data quality is going to be crappy, right? So that
No,
was like a
exactly.
big realization. And I think before we were in this kind of democratizing employee retention world, post COVID was when skills based really kicked off. And it was because,
Yes.
businesses were genuinely trying to look at pathing and all of, we're now in a different world where it's about operational efficiency, it's about excellence, it's about velocity. And that's where your kind of like demand component starts to play. So this is kind of like a really good illustration of like how the whole thing clicks together, because this is basically how we see it playing out as well within our customers. It's not like skills don't matter anymore. It's both. It's not one or
Yeah,
the
you
other,
need both.
right?
Now you need both. And of course, the AI tools don't have skills, right? They're not people, so they don't
Yep,
have skills, but they do work.
correct.
They do tasks, they do activities, and they you can use them to create outcomes. So you need to think about where do they fit here. And I'm not a big proponent, or actually, I'm very much against using like um, seeing AI tools as people because they're not people, right? They are not people. They are tools, and they're doing specific pieces of work. And so that's why you need that middle layer, because now these AI agents are doing some of these tasks and activities, and you can use them for specific outcomes. But you wouldn't say that like I don't know, your interview scheduling agent has skills, right? They're
Yep.
doing actual
Yeah, it's
work.
tasks.
Um,
Yeah, it's a
yeah, it's
task, right?
tasks. It's tasks
And it's
and activities. Exactly.
becoming, Kathi, watching like vendors, specifically analysts, you focus a lot of your time on like looking underneath the hood of what's going on. You've seen this space evolve from that time we were talking in Vegas about the
So
whole
much.
space, and look at how much it's evolved, right? And how things are happening. Talk us through a little bit of the landscape and like who sits where, and like how do you see this whole like tech vendor space? And be nice.
Of course,
I'm
of course.
nervous.
And
I'm
then,
nervous.
no, you see it here. And this is not an exhaustive list, but I will say, like most vendors haven't even woken up to this yet. Everybody, like when you go, for example, to any of the big tech conferences, there was at Asia Tech, of course, there was an Unleash. Everybody says skills in AI agents. That's on every vendor's booth, whether they're in learning or whether they're in talent acquisition or any even the HCM vendors. They're still on the skills thing, and skills are still important, of course. But where it's really at, and where I think the significant differentiating value comes in, is thinking about this work redesign. And you guys at Reejig, of course, you are really the only one that's making this your primary focus area. There's other vendors that provide data and play in that, but for you, I think you have really seen this opportunity to really pivot into this area and say, we want to make this our entire reason for being. So kudos to you for seeing this market
Thank you.
shift. I will say we talk with a lot of the big HCM vendors too, and they haven't even gotten started on that yet. So they're
Yeah.
like, wow, really, we should think about that too. I'm like, yeah, you were kind of late to the skills game too, of course, because I think the big HCMs, of course, they were a little bit later stage on that skills game. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be the same thing that eventually you'll have to provide something to your constituents and to your customers that works in some way, of course, at least some baseline product like what they do on the skills side, and better wake up to that. So some of them say,
Yeah.
oh, maybe we should buy a company, maybe we should build it, like all of that. But there's, I mean, you see some of the players here too. But Reejig, I think you are really the ones that really capture that and put that flag under your kind of offering and say, this is really ours to take. So kudos to
Yeah, and
you.
I think the thing with the HCMs, the one thing they are doing really well is they're being really open to partnerships. So
Yeah.
we're, like they're being very like working with us with customers around, like they're very focused on solving that problem for the customer. So I think like
Yeah.
the Workdays, the SAPs, like they're very focused on, well, they don't have it, but how do we help plug the two things to create this beautiful ecosystem for the customer, which is really great,
Yeah.
right? I
Oh,
think the
that's
other thing
awesome.
that's really interesting about this space, and just one thing to watch for. So, folks are all starting to know that this is a problem. This is not a HR problem. This is like a business problem. And there is a lot of
Correct.
activity. One thing just for folks to be mindful of is like the quality of the task data that you get. Like you cannot just get it based on job adverts. If you're getting that type of data, and most of the folks in the market don't have like an actual credible data source. So it's really important to make sure that you're asking the right questions to the vendors, because a lot of folks will wrap their product up in doing things and saying they do them, but you got to make sure that the quality of the data is going to be really important. Because Kathi, remember the skills harmonization problem? That was hard.
Yes.
Imagine trying to
Yeah.
harmonize tasks, right? Like it's
Well,
even
exactly.
harder. Like,
Yeah.
we've spent 3+ years, over $40+ million on building this work. Like I've got a lot of gray hairs. And the reason that we're so into it is because,
You cover them well.
well, yeah, it's a good hairdresser. But the whole thing, just for customers, that I kind of feel sorry when you walk onto the floor of one of the conferences, it's very hard to distinguish who actually does what. So I think this is where
Yes.
your role to play is really important, because you help like buyers think through like actually who does what. So this has been like really, really helpful in terms of like setting the scene. One of the things that I was really keen to go through, I think the slides have went back to the start, I think.
Oh, no,
Um,
no, this
Oh, is
was
this
just
one?
my wrap
Oh,
up.
this
Yeah,
is your
this was
last
just,
one?
yeah, this is my just my wrap up slide, basically, how you get started. And I think it goes really well with what you're going to talk about, Siobhan, how you actually help customers. So like just basically saying what should you do next, because that's always the question that we get, like, oh, this sounds all great, but how do we get started?
Yeah.
And like, well, start small, think about a business problem that you're having, not just like you can think big picture too, but a lot of times it's easier to say, here's a specific thing that we want to do. Here's a specific business problem, to the point of these 4 business drivers. Think about what you want to accomplish. Why do you want to do this? Then help prioritize basically where do you want to focus your energy on work redesign. And then basically think about this as a constant thing. Don't think about this as a project, but as an ongoing muscle, basically, that you're going to have. Leveraging AI-based work intelligence, like what you're talking about now, Siobhan, as well. And then think about how is it going to impact your talent model, because you're going to think differently about how you're going to recruit people, retain people, reskill people, redesign the work itself around those insights that you get from the work intelligence. And then always think about how can we involve employees here, because the employees are really key to that. And Siobhan, you called it out too. It can be very frightening to them to think about, wow, I mean, everybody is already thinking about AI is coming to for my job, right? Or for the work that I can do well and all of that. So always keeping the employees in the loop is really, really important from a change perspective.
No, this is incredible, Kathi. And I think what I've seen over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time kind of educating around this space, because first they think you're crazy and then people kind of go, oh, this kind of makes sense. But
Right.
really, like this kind of like research that you've kind of put together really shows folks that like where the market is going. And this is not if it's going to happen, this is already happening. It's whether or not
It's
this
here.
folks here are actually prepared for it. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing, like, is we're all in this together, we're all learning, sharing as much knowledge as possible. This research is really great. The thing that we always get feedback is, like, to your point, is like, how do we bring this to life? Right.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
one of the things I'm going to kind of walk us through is really starting to think about, when we're looking at like what this new world of data looks like what should that data look like that you need? And we talk about sort of, you need to build an AI powered workforce. You're going to need a new critical infrastructure. You're going to need to redesign, you're going to need to orchestrate, and you're going to have to evolve your workforce, right? And to do that, to Kathy's point, you're going to have to understand your world in a completely different way. So what we did a few years ago was, the problem that I had at the time wasn't actually directly correlated to agents. Actually, it was, I wanted to be able to
Yeah.
match people and jobs together. And the problem I find that is that we only had job advert data as a matching source. And for me, that wasn't enough information. So that's why we really started building out these ontologies. And we describe it as a work ontology. So we look at 25 different industries. We have a model designed for each industry. We don't have like this ChatGPT output thing. We have like deep designed by expert models. And what you really need to focus on having is, your new architecture will be your role level, how many positions. You're going to start looking at processes, tasks. Subtask is really important. If you don't have the subtask is actually where the AI is automating at today. So think of the little micro steps that are happening within a task. So if you're sourcing candidates, that's a task, right? But if you were to give that task to a candidate or to a recruiter and say, go and build agents, like they do many little micro steps within that task, which were called subtasks. So having that data is really, really critical. And then the skill is then triangulated to the task and subtask. And this is important because if you're taking away tasks because of agents, every time you take away tasks, you take away skills. And this is how you're going to know supply and demand of your org and what skills are being required, what skills are not being required anymore. So this is how the whole thing plays. The way that we really work with customers, and we're really fortunate we get to work with some of the best customers in the world, and it's really focusing on giving them this source of truth of how their world is working, right? And like we look at it at an industry level, but then we look at it at a company level. What we have seen, so I'm going to kind of show you, we've done this now over and over and over again across multiple different industries. And we typically have seen this pattern. And like, imagine you're on, I don't know if you guys had them in America, but those like spinnies at a playground and they spin and you just jump in where you can. Imagine
The
it's one of
merry-go-round.
those. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
merry-go-round. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
like you literally jump in at whatever point. And some of you will be at multiple different parts of this. Some of you won't have done anything. All of that is okay. Because what you're going to learn is this new skill to actually build this work re-engineering journey into your company. And it's never going to stop, just to be clear, because we are going to be reinventing work for the rest of your career. So this is a skill you all need to learn. And what we have seen successfully play out now after many goes at this, many trials, many, wins, many losses, like lots of different like ways of testing and trialing, is in order to re-engineer your work for the agents, you need to step one, you need to make work visible at a task level. So Kathy's point is bang on. Subtask, task data connected back into your job architecture. We call that a work architecture. So it's kind of taking that old job architecture, evolve it into a work architecture, which means all of your job architecture stuff is really important. It's directly linked to like RAM and all of the leveling and all of that important data, but it also has the work context. So give that visibility into your work. Step two then is where, we see HR actually playing this really interesting role right now, Kathy. Some are kind of taking a step back and saying, this is not our problem, this is IT's problem. They're in charge of agents. But what we're seeing is some really awesome companies who are saying, no, like this is our domain. We should be part of this. IT look after tools. We are responsible for work and workforce. So what we're seeing now is like workforce innovation. We're seeing like these different teams that are being stood up now. And imagine they're like Navy SEALs and they're being, put into the business to help them reinvent at an enterprise level, which is very exciting. And it'll be, I think, a really hot role for 2026. So happy to share with anyone after the fact if that sounds exciting, what I'm seeing and the skills that you'll need for that. But where we typically see the business needing help is tell me where there's waste, tell me where there's opportunity, right? Like actually navigate me to where I should actually go. You're not going to reinvent your whole company in one go. It's not possible. You don't have the cash. You don't have the resources. Some tasks should not be automated, right? Like let's go after the most valuable task, whether it's going to help us save money or make money. Let's start there. And then what we need to do is then re-engineer your workflow for the agents. So what agent is actually able to do this work? Most of our customers will not pick one agent. They are multi-agent environments. And what you need to make sure is that like what agent is best for what task and what agent will complete this task with the best hit rate. And how do we re-engineer that new way of working? You don't just stick an agent in and hope for the best. You have to change the way that work happens. What is the steps that we're taking out? What new has to be brought in? And then you want to equip your people. Where I see the biggest failure is not connected to the agents. Agents are not the problem. The problem is that you throw out a new way of working to your people and then you give them generalized prompt training and then everyone expects like 100% increase in productivity and then they wonder why no one has adopted it, right? It's like a really interesting thing that we're seeing. You need to equip and amplify your people. Show them their new way of working. If you're expecting that a salesperson books 5 meetings a week, and with the new ways of working, they should be booking 7, tell them that. You can't expect them to not know this information. Like, what is the outcome? What is the change in work expectation? How does this workflow feel? Help them make sure that they're comfortable doing it. And then step 5 is really proving that the agents are actually working. You don't want to re-engineer. I don't know if you would have seen in the press, but there was like, I'll not mention the company's name, but they went out and they were chest beating and they were like, we've cut thousands of people's jobs because of agents, and they've had to rehire them all. Right. So, until you're sure this thing bloody well works, don't go and make changes that are going to completely impact your people until you're sure that the impact is there. And then start re-engineering your jobs and work, right? Then start looking at those pivots and those reskill moments. So that's where we see, this is kind of like a flywheel, always on, doesn't matter what department you're in, doesn't matter what industry you're in. This is a consistent way of thinking about this. And for folks who are on this call, like, you need to do this. Like, you need to support the business in doing this, because what they're going to do is they're going to focus on one part of this. And like, we want companies to be really bold. We want them to reinvent. Like, I'm building $1 billion company, and I'm going to do it with under 100 people, right? Like, that's my mission, to see if I can do that. But like, I don't want to impact people on the other side. I want to make sure that I'm doing both at the same time. So really being bold, but also responsible, and making sure that you're actually connecting the flywheel. The other thing is, if there's folks here that have got businesses in Europe, workers' councils do not like AI. And if you do not have a plan to have the conversation around what you're going to do to make sure that your people are not being left behind, your business will be blocked from deploying AI and you will not move forward. So it's really important from a compliance and a legislation, but workers' council, that we're also thinking about the whole life cycle. And CIOs really want to work alongside the CHRO's team right now to solve this problem. We're seeing that we're getting bought a lot by the CIO and by the chief AI officers, Kathi. Like, I would say 80% of our new customers are all in that group. And then what we do is we go and knock on HR's door and say, guys, why are you not involved in this project? And they were
Yeah.
like, oh, we didn't even know. And I'm like, guys, you need to get together. You cannot be in silos. Like, let me bring you together. And then we get really like a great relationship with the customer, because we're looking at it through this whole flywheel.
Yeah, no, it's so fantastic, and I'm so glad you're mentioning that kind of collaboration between IT and the business and HR, because I think for everybody, if you're in HR, this is a huge opportunity to add a ton of value in the thing that matters most to the business right now, right? If you're not involved in this, you're missing out on a big, big opportunity. We get this a lot of times from CHROs, the forward-looking ones. All say, well, I just inserted myself into the AI
Yep.
transformation. I just have to be head on head, like leading it together with the CIO, because it can't be an IT driven thing alone. Because we've all been there, right? We've all been there when there's something that's purely tech driven. Well, CIOs don't have a mandate to look at skills, to look at people, to look at where people are adding value, and all of that. You can't do all of this, like reskilling, redesigning, recruiting people differently without these insights. So it's
Yep.
it's it's a really huge opportunity.
And most of the time with customers, what we see is that when we've started working with HR and give them the work data, and they bring it to the IT and the CIO's team, they're like, oh my God, where did you get this data? We've been really struggling with use cases, and we've spent so much time trying to figure out where to go that we got stuck in status quo. And you're not giving me data that tells me what's happening and then where to go. It's like a
Yes,
completely like, and then HR like, yeah, it's kind of like our thing. Like, it's our job, right? So
that's
it's like, I mean,
exactly
this I think will be the biggest career move in 2026. Anyone
no,
who's
I
on
agree.
this call who's thinking about what your career future, like these jobs will be so great next year, because they'll have this kind of like middle ground kind of. I don't know if you listen, but we hosted a webinar with MasterCard CHRO and the chief AI officer there, and they described, Kathi, on the webinar, that this is like a COVID moment where
Mm,
CFO,
I love
CIO,
that. Yeah.
CHRO are suddenly like working really closely together on a problem that they all need to be involved in, which I thought was really interesting, because you're going to see this kind of new trifecta happening across the business. And your
Correct.
CFO cares because they want the money, right? And also
Well,
they're spending
obviously
millions.
they're
Yeah.
spending, right? So they say, well, we can't invest in one side and not recoup it somewhere else. And yet only 5% are actually seeing that value, as we saw from
Big
this MIT study. So somewhere that
Exactly.
has to happen.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I think the spend on AI versus the not seeing value plus not knowing where to go is causing a lot of stress in the system. A lot of the work we're
Oh,
doing right now,
absolutely.
our data is getting presented to boards
Yeah.
because they have to report on the status. So the CEO is under pressure on this. And I think for folks, practically, if you're thinking about going and running this in your company or you want to start taking action, is get like a map of your work. Like get like imagine that you have a map of your company and you can be the navigator that tells people that we're going to show you what has always been invisible is now visible, and get that map and get that view so that you can then be the one that shows the business where is that waste? Where is that opportunity? Can you imagine someone in HR going up to the CFO and saying, I know the tasks that will actually make us more money? Can you imagine
Yeah. Yeah.
like
I mean,
what the
it's
impact would be to
right.
have that level of conversation, right? And I think, that map is like a GPS, kind of navigating you on where to start taking that action. And then
Yeah.
the complex thing I find, we see Microsoft Copilot is like a lot in most companies because they
Yeah.
are already there. And what we see is like, people are wanting to use ChatGPT, people are wanting to use Copilot. Our view is like, look at all of the agents that you are pre-approved allowed to use, make the most of those before you go out and start buying others. Because what you're going to find is if everybody is allowed to go and build their own agents, and you're all building the same agent for the same task, but no one's communicating, you're going to cost the business an awful lot of money. And it's called shadow AI, right? Where it's just everybody has got this like scope creep and it's just a mess. So, really helping the business figure out like what agents. There's also a debate, Kathi, like where do the agent logs sit? Like, do
Yes.
HR keep a register of them? Is it in IT? There's like this kind of different conversation about
Yes.
where it should sit. So, like, that's going to be an interesting one that we watch play out as well.
For sure. Yeah.
And then I think, like, just really that point around amplifying your people, make sure your people know the expectations about their role. If you are going to have a new way of working and people are not performing to that, have you actually spoke to them about this new workflow? Are they knowing that this is really important? That's going to be something that, like, you can't say it's failed if we haven't spent time making sure that your people are actually, one, learning the skills that they need just in time to adopt the agents, but also like learning that new workflow. So like if someone has to do their work in a completely different way, if like you have to give them that view of what that's really looking like. And then what you want to then focus on is that impact. How has work changed? So when we talk about like impact on agents, it's not like what's the consumption and many people are logging into this thing. Has work actually changed? Did something get better? Did we increase outcomes? Like that's a real true measurement of actual like agent impact as well. So, helping folks be really clear on like what is that actual impact and is it enough that we start re-engineering these jobs? And that's the part where I do worry about is that folks go too soon without like watching it play out. I'll give you an example. Like when we first started really playing hard in agents, we built so whenever you're booking demos and like salespeople reach out to you and ask you to book a demo, right? We had a whole team of folks that were doing that and cost a lot of money, and their job was just to go and find folks to go and like show our product to. We then completely removed that and built agents, and what we found was it was really great for about 2 months, and then it pissed everybody off. Right? It was just so aggressive and the language
Yes.
was
Yeah.
terrible. It felt
Totally.
like a robot. It like, so then we
Yeah.
pulled the whole thing out. So like, you know, I shouldn't have made too much structural change too soon, but I did. And so I think this is a lesson that I've had around this journey is like, you got to wait and see, is this actually effective? And does it
Yeah, for
work
sure.
before you go and start to re-engineer? And then really finally is like, you need to make sure that your people are being prepared for this. One of the big things that we see from customers is that they're really like focused on talking about AI, but the employees are feeling afraid. And a lot of the reason is just we're not communicating, hey guys, that we are going on this journey, but at the same time, we're looking at like what could you pivot into? What are those jobs that are important and communicating that? even just the openness to having that type of conversation and knowing that like these jobs will still be really important for our company. These jobs are probably not likely to be things that we're going to invest in the future, which means that if I'm an employee, I at least have the visibility of like what matters to the company. So, and the skilling that's required so that I can drive towards that. So I think that's going to be a really important dimension as well for folks to just make sure that they're actively evolving their workforce. It's not going to happen overnight, right? Like the reskilling requirements, this is not like it's AI is definitely having impact into the jobs, right? But it's not necessarily impacting the actual jobs to the point that we're seeing, massive amounts of changes, Kathi. I don't know about what you're seeing. Like it's little incremental shifts to task.
Yeah, not yet, not yet. I think most organizations, because of where the technologies are, quite frankly, we're seeing like smaller pieces, which we also see when we look at companies being, most of them are in stage one or stage two of this maturity model. I think that shows also it's mostly still like these within your own productivity thing, but things will come, right? Things will come pretty rapidly, and I think if you want, you can either be a winner on this, or maybe I don't want to call it a loser, but maybe a non-winner on
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
if you're not
I mean,
a
there is
winner
going
on
to be
this,
winners and losers, but like I
yeah,
don't think you're being harsh. I actually think you're being really honest. I think there where the biggest loss I think will be that people waited too long and didn't do stuff.
yes, yeah, I think that's right,
And
because
they
with
hung
these
out
tools
and
moving
waited.
so fast, yeah, the tools move so fast, right? AI moves so fast. Every day something new comes around, and I mean, I will always say also, think about the AI we have today is the worst AI we'll ever have, right?
I know.
Because
It is
it's like
it's
it's the worst that we'll ever have. So, and it's getting very, very fast. Like it's getting very, very fast and rapidly evolving. Basically, how what these AI tools can do, and so if you're constantly doing this, you're not going to be left behind. But if you're waiting until the AI tools are perfect, you way have waited too long, right? Because they're never going to be perfect, but soon enough they're
exactly.
going to be able to do amazing things. And yeah, it's always moving faster, basically.
Yeah, and I think like the advantage of going first is the longer the AI has time to train on your model, the stronger the AI is, the harder it is for other folks to catch up, right? And I
Yes,
think like
absolutely.
most organizations I have seen really focused on like what can they build into their offering to get to their customer. What we're starting to see now is this like two-pronged approach. Like, what can we do for our customer? But now it's like they're turning their glances into the internal workforce and saying, okay, what are we doing here?
Correct.
Why have we not shifted the dial here? And I think for folks on this call, like this is the most exciting opportunity of your career that you will ever have. This will
Yes.
never happen again. Like this moment
Yes.
in time, and I know I sound completely crazy, but this is like a once in a generation change to work that companies have no idea what they're doing. There is no,
Yes.
like, even the AI companies are still figuring this stuff out, right? Just like you said at the
Absolutely. Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
One
folks
of the
that put their
AI
hand
companies.
up and go, put me in, I'll have a crack.
Yes.
Like, let me have a
Yes.
go. Like, these folks are going to have the best career opportunities. And I think the biggest rules of 2026, as I said, is going to be really focused on this kind of work intelligence, work innovation, whatever you want to call it.
I
It'll be
agree.
about helping the business move from a historic model of people and jobs into this new world of human and agent. And what
Yes.
is it that we can do to enable that new world? And I think if anyone is interested, after this, like feel free to like send me a DM and I can send you some information. But also if you guys want access to some data that you can go, I can give you some of our data for free. Like just take some of our data from our team and go and bring it to your leaders. We also have it uploaded into Galileo as well. So I think Kathi, like we'll push the Galileo tool because there's
Yes.
a lot. I was actually on a customer call the other day, and I'll not mention the customer. It was a very cool customer, and they were like, "Oh, we already have seen your data." And I was like, "How have you seen my data?" And they were like,
Thank you.
"Through Galileo." And I was like, "That's actually really
Oh, yeah.
cool." And
It's
they were like, they've been
fantastic.
using this with their teams to really start focusing on. And the one other thing I would say to folks on this call, there is a moment in time where you should be customer zero. Like, don't let this
Mhm.
happen to
Yep.
you. I
I
think that
agree.
HR right now, even if it's just tiny and it's a little scope of work in your teams, I think you all have a responsibility to learn how to do this to yourself to then bring it to the business. So I think like no
Absolutely.
one, you're not going to like, you get to learn openly. There's a whole community of folks that we can connect you to as well that are on this journey together. But I think like you need to build the skill for yourself, but also like be customer zero, like show everybody how to do it and then bring it to the organization. And that's how
Agree.
you become the hero of the story, right, Kathy?
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Microsoft, for example. I think they are doing this. I know they're doing this in HR first. So they're starting with HR
Exactly.
because they're saying, we need to see how this works for us before we can bring it to our clients. And if Microsoft is doing this, who are selling the Copilot, I mean, that's their business model is that. I think everybody could maybe take a lead from that as well and
Yeah.
do
And
the
and
same thing.
everyone that we work with as well, like we're like even if the business is asking for this, do yourself too. Like
You have
make
to do
sure
yourself
that
first.
you're
Yeah.
getting this. But for those that joined us today, thank you so much. Hopefully you find this information. It's a lot. This is a new world, but we're trying as best as we can to share as much of the learning as possible. Kathy, thank you so much for the expertise, the time, the research. We're going to share an after this fact pack with like some information. If anyone wants access to some data, happy to share some of our out of the box data so that you can use that and sort of learn. Have an incredible day for those who are listening on the treadmill. Go faster. Like, come on, you can do it. Talk
Thank
to
you
you
so much.
soon.
Thanks everybody for joining us. This was awesome. Thank you.
Take
Really
care.
appreciate it.